this is Marion from Within. Welcome back to our series of interviews of next generation data providers. So as we explained you on the previous videos, we want to help our clients across the financial industry to explore the broad ESG data market. At a time when data providers tend to be more and more US-centric, today we will discover a French fintech based in Paris, which is Iceberg Data Lab. It's a specialist in climate and biodiversity datasets, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Mathieu Maurin, Iceberg Data Lab CEO. Hi Mathieu, thanks for joining me. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. Hi Marion, nice meeting you and speaking to you. And well, I'm the CEO of Iceberg Data Lab, as you said, and I'm very pleased to introduce our data solution to your client.
Good. So maybe before deep diving into your offer, can you tell us in few words about you, your background before you launched Iceberg Data Lab, and why did you create this company?
Thank you, Marion. Yes, I worked for more than 10 years in a larger financial institution, BNP Paribas, working on what is now named as green loans. And I realized at the time that we had a huge problem with data and missing data gap, basically, to be able to correctly leverage and developing lending policies and structured financial instruments to support basically the development of the green economy and allowing lenders and investors willing to support that economy to correctly flag sustainable clients or sustainable projects. That's why I left the bank in 3 years ago. And first, I was the CEO of the data branch of an environmental advisory firm, very focused on climate. And thereafter, and since last September 2019, I founded, along with the CTO, who was the CTO of several tech companies, Iceberg Data Lab, with a double purpose of first bridging the data gap when it comes to ESG, especially and to begin with a very underserved and very important segment, which is biodiversity. And second, and that was the value added of Pierre-Olivier, the CTO, to use state-of-the-art IT tools to automate and improve data collection and basically use ocean of unstructured data that we have to identify and model the impact of issues on the environment.
Okay, so you created your company in 2019. So how many people are in your team today?
Today, the company has a dozen employees. A third of them are on the tech side, and the others are involved in research and modeling analytics.
Okay.
What's important, what I want to mention is that the company made a quantum leap last spring when we reached an agreement whereby the leading environmental consultant based in Paris, whose name is iCare & Consult, who works for corporate financial institutions for more than 10 years to help them model their impact on the environment. They are the leader, especially of life cycle assessment. We reached an agreement whereby the data for finance branch of that environmental consulting firm was brought and merged with Iceberg Data Lab. So as a result, we were funded, incorporated last September, but actually our track record is 5 years long because we have now the metrics database and team coming from iCare, and basically we will integrate their metrics into our IT platform, which will allow us first cover the whole set of environmental issues. And second, it means that we have a lot of clients using this data for several years, datasets which are very recognized, and now function as a whole integrated company.
Okay. Yeah. So it gives you a more data sets and maybe more information on companies. So if we go more in detail in your offer, your models calculate the environmental impact of issuers and assets throughout all the value chain. Can you explain us how it works and why it is important to measure this?
Yes, I would say that what's important now at this point in terms of ESG, which, as you know, is a young and evolving topic, started only by a very rough stuff like modeling impact on companies of size. Modeling the company throughout their value chain, what is known in the climate field as scope 3, upstream or downstream. That's indeed important because if you don't factor upstream impact or downstream impact, you may believe that retail companies, for instance, have no impact whatsoever, while if you can take into account the value chain, the impact of a company which has a stringent selection of its supplier, meat supplier, for instance, a wood supplier, is very important. And so if you don't look at the whole value chain, you're missing the point, basically. The following level was to assess the company based on their consumption or production flows, and not on their turnover, because if you base your assessment on sales only, you create bias, because obviously, to take the example of the textile sector, you may have two different t-shirts, okay, using the same sourcing and not sold at the same price because you have brand policies, and so you may overestimate basically the impact of sellers located at the high end or at the low end, conversely, of the value chain of the brand power. And so that's why it's very important to consider the whole value chain. And the following next frontier, I would say, is asset level data. Because at the end of the day, and obviously that's of paramount importance for biodiversity, it's not the same thing to have a highly polluting business located in the middle of nowhere and located in the middle of the Amazon forest. It's not the same impact from an environmental perspective. It's not the same kind of liability, reputation, risk, and so on. And we do all that in an integrated manner, which means consistent in terms of modeling. We have several metrics: biodiversity, climate, overall environmental impact, which are produced by the same engine and the same model, which means that they are consistent from a modeling perspective. And that's very important. And the second important point is that we are a fintech, so we have data collection and modeling tool. We are also an environmental ESG data provider, which means that we have a research team that our metrics are based on science and on the last available standards. Our terms of reference are published by independent and recognized institutions, such as SBT targets for climate, for instance. That's important. And we have a team of analysts involved in controlling the modeling, correcting methodological bias, doing quality control of the input and the output of the model. Last but not least, we have scientific partners such as ICANN Consult, which developed several of the methods that we own and that we use today, and which will continue to work for us, continue enriching these methodologies.
Okay, so continuing on technology, you said your team is using artificial intelligence. So how does it help you to analyze data and to measure all your metrics?
The challenge of ASR investors willing to assess the impact of their portfolio is the lack of data. So what we do basically is that we use state-of-the-art tools and techniques, machine learning, big data, and so on, artificial intelligence, in order to identify what the company are doing, and with all that information, all that data basically creates a data lake. At this point, however, what you need is a research team which has the skills and the expertise to make sense of that data lake and to structure that data into usable use case for investors. So for instance, that means to go from the supply chain of a retail operator to indicators assessing based on that supply chain what its impact on, say, climate, biodiversity, deforestation would be.
Okay, and you said previously that you are using unstructured data, and so where does your data come from, and how many data sources do you have?
I'm not really capable of putting a figure on the number of data sources. Mm-hmm. What I can say is that we have a financial data provider, okay, to provide us normalized financial data, okay, which is important, and not really the business we're in. For the rest, we leverage on public data published by the companies, data published by regulators, and so on. When you are a sectoral expert, an environmental expert, you know where you have to look at relevant information, and you are capable of challenging what you see in the report. Afterward, all you need, is a smart dev capable of pumping that information and structuring it.
Okay, so then how often do you update your data? Is it on demand or?
We update the data on a yearly basis. Our purpose is really to provide on top of reported financial and extra financial information an extra layer of analysis, making it simple to use for our client, and making sure for them that they have an assessment which is based on science, and second, on a level playing field.
Okay, so you said as well that with your partnership with the ICANN Consult, you have old data. So what is the history of your data? Was it 5 years you said before?
Yes, they started documenting and enriching data since 5 years. So not on all the metrics, okay, because they started by climate, which is most, I would say, streamlined metric now out there. So it's fair to say that if we look at all the different metrics, we have 3 years,
okay,
track record available. Maybe longer on some universe, some data points, but 3 years is a fair approach.
And which area does your data cover? A geographical area. Sorry.
We cover all the largest corporates in the developed countries of the world. At the end of next year, we will extend that dramatically to all the large corporates, period, and issuers of fixed income instruments.
Okay, yeah, the time to collect data and adapt the models.
Yes, but we have several approaches. Our coverage basically on the portfolio of financial institutions or financial instruments is 100%, because we can model based on sector, sales, allocation. On a large and enlarging scope, we will go beyond that to a more granular and bottom-up assessment based on the production, consumption, based on the reporting, based on the performance of the companies, and on that the universe is the large scope, expanding to financial to issuers of fixed income instruments next year.
Okay, so what is your customer typology today, and can you give us use cases of your customer? How do they actually use your data?
To do our job correctly, we have to challenge what the company has published, which means that we have to take care of the conflict of interest, which means that we don't work for corporates, because otherwise we will be conflicted. So our core customers are financial institutions, so asset managers, pension funds, banks, insurance company, and all the ecosystem working for them, meaning consultants working for them. That's basically the core of our clients.
Okay, and so then how do they concretely use your data? You said you have a platform, so how does it work?
We have 3 layers of services. A do-it-yourself tool, okay, very simple to use. For the portfolio, you have a nice pie chart covering all the different thematics I mentioned earlier. Second, a database, and so classically you may use a platform to download it, or you may have a feed, an API, FTP server, whatever, to download the whole of part based on the geography or based on the sector of the database, and portfolio analysis tools. That's our 3 scope of services.
So maybe you have concrete examples of use cases of your clients to share with us?
Yes, thank you, Marion. To be concrete, maybe a spotlight on a couple of examples of what we do for our clients. So, for instance, Fulcrum published last summer, during the summer, they launched a climate fund, so an open fund, which will be a 2-degree fund and aligned with Paris target, with our data and with the temperature methodology that we use, which is based on compliance with SDG target. That's an example. At the other end of the spectrum, we signed an agreement with a bank. So a retail bank, can't give its name yet, which will use our biodiversity data to assess the biodiversity impact of their portfolio of retail clients, and also to originate more sustainable clients in some specific and impactful sector. And you see that 2 very different use cases, 2 different typology of clients, 2 different approaches, very granular on one end, on the other hand, it's a more massive and systematic collection and identification of the client impact. And that gives you a flavor of what we do now with all the data sets that are at our disposal and that we can harvest and model for our clients.
Okay, and then does it allow us to comply with a recommendation like SASB, TCFD, SDGs?
Yes, absolutely. And that's why our clients came to us in the first place. That was to comply with the requirement of the TCFD that financial institutions should report and manage their impact. To comply, and that's a harder regulation with Article 173 in France, which specifically demand a report or an explanation, comply or explain. And so several of our clients are using that. For instance, you can take the French pension fund, use the data developed by iCare and Consult to publish their environmental report, which received a prize. So for reporting purpose, and also in a more proactive manner to develop investment strategies. That's the kind of use which are made. Last but not least, SDG is a yardstick for several asset managers, and I would say that our data help to comply with 5 of the SDGs, 12 to 15, and 17 otherwise, which are related to environment. So we really are a one-stop shop when it comes to environmental metrics, and for financial institutions willing to have something more systematic, more reliable, more based on science and recognized standards, and more comprehensive in terms of coverage of the whole impact of a company in its sector, in its value chain.
Okay. So thank you, Mathieu, for all your explanation. We will put the link of your website down the video. If anyone has a question on your company, they can contact you directly. And thank you for your time. And yeah, see you next time. Have a good day.
Have a good day.